The first letter arrived exactly 2 weeks after her sentencing. Thick, expensive cream paper, the prison stamp stark against it. Madison Hawthorne. Seeing her name written like that, knowing where it came from, sent a wave of cold nausea through me. I didn't open it. I just stood there in the warm kitchen of my godparents' Oregon home, the smell of cinnamon rolls baking, Lucky nudging my hand with his wet nose, and stared at the envelope like it was a venomous snake. She was pleading her innocence from behind bars. After everything. The ice in my chest, formed the day my parents vanished, cracked and splintered all over again. You see, my entire life, my parents taught me one thing above all: never let success get to your head. Drake said it, but my parents lived it. We were new money millionaires, a fact they treated like a dirty little secret they desperately wanted to shield me from. While my classmates flaunted the latest iPhones, I had a clunky, no-name device. Designer labels? Forget it. My wardrobe was a carefully curated collection from Goodwill and Marshall's. Even our golden retriever, Lucky, happily crunched on generic kibble from a big, unmarked bag. Honestly, for years, I resented them. Deeply. I'd watched those extravagant Christmas haul videos online, my heart aching with a fierce, burning envy. I'd see girls at school draped in clothes that cost more than our monthly groceries, their faces painted with expensive makeup, and I'd feel like an outsider in my own skin. I craved that shiny, effortless wealth, believing it was the key to happiness, to belonging. The shift happened slowly, painfully, when I was 15. I was slumped in the back of Mrs. Peterson's English class, half listening to a lecture on Shakespeare, when Chelsea Harrison walked in. Chelsea, whose family owned half the town. One of her equally wealthy friends turned, loud enough for the whole back row to hear, and sneered, "Seriously, if my parents made me wear second-hand clothes, I would literally live myself." They burst into shrieking laughter, rocking back in their designer chairs like it was the peak of comedy. That casual cruelty, the utter disdain for anything less than brand new perfection, hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't funny. It was ugly. And in that stark, uncomfortable moment, gazing at their perfectly glossed lips twisted in mockery, a flicker of understanding ignited. My parents weren't depriving me. They were protecting me. Protecting me from becoming that. The crushing weight of my resentment began to lift, replaced by a slow, dawning gratitude. Maybe they were right that I think they sensed the change in me. The forced smiles became a little less forced. The constant comparisons faded. They started saying yes to an extra weekend trip, maybe a slightly nicer pair of sneakers. Nothing extravagant, just a little more breathing room. It felt like a reward for finally seeing the value in what they offered, which wasn't things, but perspective. It was around this fragile new piece that Aunt Madison re-entered our lives. She was my mother's sister, yet couldn't have been more different. Where my mom radiated quiet warmth in her worn sweaters, Madison shimmered with cold opulence. She arrived in a pink Tesla that screamed for attention, drenched in Chanel No. 5 that announced her presence before she even stepped out, adorned in solid gold jewelry that clinked with every movement. We rarely saw her, her world orbiting far above our humble one. That summer, she insisted we join her for a day on her boat. Not just any boat. A gleaming white mini-yacht named Serenity. My stomach clenched the moment I saw it. We looked absurdly out of place, Mom in her faded floral swimsuit, Dad in his decade-old trunks, me in my Marshall's finds, stepping onto a deck polished enough to see our nervous reflections. Madison, of course, looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover in her Prada one-piece and Gucci slides. For a while, it was just awkward. The sun beat down, the water sparkled, and Madison held court, her voice a little too loud, her laughter a little too sharp. Then, around 4 p.m., the sky darkened unervingly fast. The wind picked up, whipping the sea into angry, choppy peaks. The yacht began to buck violently. I was hit by a wave of seasickness so intense the world tilted. Stumbling below deck, I collapsed onto a bed in one of the plush cabins, clutching my churning stomach, praying for land. When the violent rocking finally eased and we reached the marina, relief washed over me. I scrambled back on deck, eager to find my parents, to laugh shakily with them about the unexpected adventure. But the deck was empty except for Aunt Madison. She stood near the gangway, a silk handkerchief pressed dramatically to her dry eyes. The look on her face, a grotesque mask of pity, stopped me cold. "Sweetheart," her voice was a theatrical whisper, overly loud in the sudden stillness. The color drained from my face, a cold dread seeping into my bones. "Oh, my darling girl, they didn't make it." She took a shuddering breath. "The water, it got so terribly rough, they were swept overboard before anyone could react. We searched, but it was too late." The words didn't make sense. Overboard? Gone? The world tilted again, but this time it wasn't seasickness. It was the ground disappearing. I collapsed onto the hard, wet deck, a raw, guttural sound tearing from my throat that didn't feel like my own. Pain, sharp and absolute, lanced through me. I vaguely remember Madison gesturing sharply. Strong arms lifted me, carrying me like a broken doll to her waiting town car. I was numb, mute. No words would form, only a silent scream echoing endlessly inside my skull. The next few days blurred into a haze of suffocating grief in Madison's sterile mansion. I stayed curled on the unfamiliar silk sheets of a guest room bed, drifting in and out of a sleep filled with nightmares of dark water and reaching hands. I clung to a desperate, naive hope that Madison was searching, that my parents would be found alive. She played the part well, speaking in hushed tones about Coast Guard efforts and holding on to hope. After only 3 agonizing days, they were found. But not alive. The bodies, they told me, were unrecognizable. Ravaged by the sea. Identified enough for a closed casket funeral. The finality of it shattered what little was left of my world that I wanted to wear the simple black dress my mom had bought me for my last birthday. It still faintly smelled like her lavender hand lotion. A tiny piece of her to hold on to. But when I opened the wardrobe in Madison's guest room, it was empty. All my clothes, my connection to my old life, gone. Madison appeared in the doorway, holding a ridiculously extravagant sequined black ball gown. "You're a wealthy young woman now," she stated, her voice devoid of warmth. "It's time you started acting like one. Wear this." The only living piece of my parents left was Lucky. In those first, impossible weeks, he was my anchor. Every night, as silent tears soaked my pillow in that vast, cold bedroom, he'd heave himself onto the bed beside me, rest his heavy head on my leg, and let out a deep, sighing breath. It felt like he understood. He was the only one I could truly grieve around. If Madison caught even a shadow of sadness on my face, she'd instantly materialize with another lavish gift, a beige Marc Jacobs tote bag, the newest iPhone still in its box, gleaming white AirPod Max headphones. The guilt was suffocating. How could I be sad when she was spending so much trying to fix it? Her gifts became a cage, silencing my grief, making me feel ungrateful for the crushing weight of loss. So Lucky became my lifeline, my secret confidant. I'd curl under the suffocatingly soft silk sheets, feeling utterly hollow, and he'd climb into my lap, licking the salt from my cheeks until, exhausted, the corners of my mouth might twitch upwards. His pleading brown eyes, his insistence on walks, were the only forces strong enough to pull me from bed on the desolate weekends, but I'm a light sleeper. And every night, just as sleep threatened to pull me under, I'd gently push him off the bed and close the bedroom door, needing the quiet. A stupid, normal habit. A habit that cost him his life. It was a Saturday noon. I'd spent the morning lost in a fog of tears and mindless scrolling, seeking the numbness of the internet. Finally roused by a gnawing need for Lucky's comfort, I went looking for him. He wasn't in his usual spot by the patio doors. Panic started to flutter in my chest. That's when Madison walked into the living room, holding a fancy dog carrier. But inside wasn't lucky that it was a tiny, perfectly groomed white poodle. "I finally got rid of that shaggy mongrel that was always bothering you," Madison announced, her voice bright, almost cheerful. "Meet Coco. Much more suitable, darling." My blood ran cold. "Got rid of? Where's Lucky?" My voice sounded thin, strained. She waved a dismissive hand adorned with diamonds. "Oh, don't worry about that stray anymore. He's gone. Coco is purebred, hypoallergenic, perfect." She opened the carrier and practically shoved the trembling poodle towards me. "Pet her. Isn't she precious?" I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I turned and fled back up the grand staircase to my room, the cold marble biting my bare feet. I slammed the door and leaned against it, sliding down to the floor, my whole body shaking. Gone. Lucky was gone. My last connection, my comfort, snuffed out because he was an inconvenience. An ugly stray. I stared around the room filled with Madison's expensive, unwanted gifts, the designer bags, the latest tech, the jewelry still in boxes. A wave of utter despair crashed over me. What was the point? Why shouldn't I just end it all? The darkness felt so inviting, a release from the suffocating pain and betrayal. Then I heard her voice. Loud, clearer than usual, drifting up from the marble foyer below. Madison was on the phone. And I was shattered enough to be reckless, desperate enough to listen. I crept to my door, opening it just a crack, holding my breath. Of course I had to get rid of them. Her voice was sharp, businesslike. What they were doing to that girl? Practically abuse. Raising her in poverty, denying her everything she deserves. It was disgusting. No child should live like that, especially not with the money they had. The words slammed into me. Get rid of them. Them. Not just Lucky. Them. My heart stopped, then plummeted into a frozen abyss. It wasn't an accident. The boat trip. The sudden storm. My parents vanishing. Lucky being put down. All of it. Orchestrated. Planned. Executed by the woman who shared my blood. By my aunt that I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, the cold marble leaching the warmth from my bare feet, mirroring the ice spreading through my veins. Her voice continued, casual, discussing the elimination of my family like she was arranging a stock portfolio. I forced my trembling legs to move, creeping silently back to my room, every fiber screaming. I locked the door and collapsed against it, the horror washing over me in nauseating waves. She murdered them. She murdered my parents, my gentle, humble parents, because she thought their values were abuse. She murdered Lucky because he was a reminder. A piece of them. And I was next. I knew it with terrifying certainty. I was just a problem to be managed, an inheritance to be controlled. Panic clawed at my throat. I had to escape. But how? 16, penniless, isolated. Madison had confiscated my old phone immediately, replacing it with her monitored, restricted version. All our relatives lived scattered across the country. I didn't even know their numbers. I was trapped in a gilded cage with a monster that I spent the rest of that day pretending to be violently ill, the truth churning inside me far worse than any physical sickness. When Madison knocked, her perfume seeping under the door, I mumbled about a migraine. She left a tray of some elaborate salmon dish outside. The smell of it, usually appealing, now made me gag, a constant reminder of her poisonous presence. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents tumbling into the churning, black water. Did they call my name? Did they know it was Madison? Did they suffer? The luxurious silk sheets felt like a shroud, smothering me. The next morning, she barged in without knocking, dressed in a cream suit worth a fortune. Get up, she commanded, her expensive perfume assaulting my senses. We're going shopping. You need a proper wardrobe for your new life. Every instinct screamed to fight, to flee, to scratch her cold eyes out. But the memory of her phone call, the chilling calculation in her voice, held me back. If she could kill her own sister, what would stop her from silencing me? I swallowed the bile, nodded, and dressed in the designer clothes she'd chosen, my prison uniform. The shopping trip was a surreal torture. High-end boutiques where sales staff fawned over Madison. Champagne flutes appeared. Macarons were offered. I stood like a mannequin while she held up obscenely priced dresses, criticizing my frame. "You have your mother's unfortunate bone structure," she sighed at one point, examining a silk dress. "We'll simply have to work around it." I bit my tongue until I tasted blood, the metallic tang anchoring me to the horrible reality. Playing the part became my survival. Over the next few days, I forced smiles. I thanked her for the gilded shackles, the clothes, the gadgets. I even tried to pat the horrid little poodle, Coco, who seemed to sense my hatred, baring her tiny teeth whenever I approached. But beneath the surface, I was constantly alert, listening, watching, planning my escape. Madison relaxed, believing her expensive band-aids were healing my grief. She started drinking heavily at dinner, her tongue loosened by wine. She ranted about her business deals, her travels, her ex-husbands. My parents were mentioned only with contempt. "Your mother chose teaching," she'd sneer. "Could have had everything. Instead, she picked that pathetic man." Her words were daggers, each one twisting deeper. About 2 weeks after the boat accident, she got particularly drunk. We were by her infinity pool, the city lights glittering far below. The scent of night-blooming jasmine hung thick and cloying in the air. She swirled her wine, her words slurring. "You know," she hiccuped, "I tried. So many times. Offered your mother a real career, introductions, connections. But no." She slammed her glass down. She wanted to be a teacher. Pathetic. "Love doesn't pay the bills, darling. Look where love got her." The rage was white-hot. She loved teaching, I managed to whisper, gripping my glass of sparkling water so hard my knuckles turned white. "Love?" Madison scoffed, her diamond rings flashing cruelly in the pool lights. "Meaningless sentiment. She could have had this." She gestured vaguely at the obscene mansion. "But she chose poverty. And look at the result." Her cold, dismissive wave towards the void where my parents had been was the final straw. That night, lying awake in the suffocating darkness, I made my first real plan. I needed proof. Evidence of her crime. Then I could go to the police, or at least use it to force her to let me go. I started small, seizing moments when she was occupied, Pilates, spa appointments, long lunches. I'd slip into her sleek, modern office, so unlike Dad's cozy, book-filled study. Her computer was locked. But in her desk drawer, beneath financial papers dense with jargon, I found it. The boat rental contract. And clipped to it, the weather report for that day. Clear skies. Calm seas. No storm warnings. Nothing. My hands trembled violently as I read the damning words. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I fumbled with the new iPhone she'd given me, my jailer's tool, and snapped pictures. But when I tried to email them, send them anywhere, I hit a wall. Restricted. Only pre-approved numbers. Madison's control was absolute. That I kept searching, fueled by fear and fury. Behind a hideously expensive abstract painting in her bedroom, I found a wall safe. In the garage, 3 more luxury cars besides the Tesla gathered dust. The pool house held a room stacked floor to ceiling with designer goods, tags still attached, a museum of unused extravagance. But no smoking gun. Nothing directly linking her to murder. Then, over breakfast one morning, surgical precision in every cut of her egg white omelet, she dropped the bombshell. "You'll be attending boarding school in Connecticut after summer." Very exclusive. They specialize in difficult transitions. It will help you move past all this unpleasantness. School doesn't start for months, I protested, my voice tight. They have an excellent summer program, she countered smoothly, her smile chillingly empty. For students processing significant trauma. You leave next week. Connecticut. Hundreds of miles away. Isolated. Cut off completely. Under her thumb. It was a prison sentence. That night, desperation overruled caution. I waited until her bedroom door clicked shut, then grabbed a backpack. From her purse in the foyer, I snatched whatever cash I found, about $200. I shoved in a water bottle and granola bars, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. I made it down the long driveway, the manicured lawns eerie in the moonlight. Reaching the imposing front gate, the security guard stepped out of his booth. He was a big man, usually with kind eyes that had crinkled when he saw Lucky. "Miss Hawthorne," he said gently, but firmly blocking my path. "Your aunt instructed us you're not to leave the property unaccompanied. For your safety." My safety, I echoed, the bitter taste of defeat filling my mouth. Of course, the next morning, Madison's fury was glacial. No shouting. Just icy calm that was infinitely worse. "I am trying to help you," she hissed, each word a shard of ice. "Your parents left you nothing but their values. I am offering you the world. Show some gratitude." She hired a stranger to pack my things for boarding school. I watched, numb, as they folded designer clothes I despised into gleaming Louis Vuitton luggage. The only piece of my parents I managed to save was a small photo I found tucked deep in my old wallet. I slipped it into my bra, a tiny, secret talisman against the coming darkness. The drive to the airport was silent. Madison typed furiously on her phone. I stared out the tinted window, trying to burn the image of my hometown into my memory, the streets my parents had walked, the places we'd been happy. They looked alien now, viewed through the lens of betrayal. At the gate, she finally looked at me, her gaze appraising, calculating. "This is for the best," she stated. "Someday, you'll understand. You'll thank me." The urge to scream, to attack, was overwhelming. Instead, I nodded mutely and walked onto the plane, leaving everything I knew and loved behind. The boarding school, Crestwood Academy, was a picturesque prison. Impossibly green lawns, ivy-clad brick buildings whispering of old money and older secrets. Students looked like catalog models. My roommate, Brittany from Greenwich, squealed over my luggage. "Oh. My. God. The limited edition? Mom's been on the wait list forever." I wanted to shove it all at her. Instead, I smiled tightly and unpacked my gilded cage. The promised grief counseling was a cruel joke, 1 hour a week with Dr. Whitman, who spent most of the session scrolling her phone, her voice flat, her eyes dead. Classes were filled with kids complaining about trust funds and summer homes as if they were genuine hardships. The worst was the isolation. Madison had provided a list of approved contacts, just her number. No calls to old friends. No emails to my parents' colleagues. The library computers blocked social media. I was a ghost drifting through manicured purgatory that I made one connection. Russell. A scholarship kid from Boston who worked in the dining hall. Dark hair perpetually falling into kind eyes, a smile that felt real amidst the pervasive fakeness. He noticed me always sitting alone and started joining me during his breaks. He never pried about my family. I never asked about the occasional bruises on his arms. "This place," he muttered one day, stirring his coffee, "is basically a prison with better desserts." He made me laugh, a rusty, unfamiliar sound. Madison's Sunday calls were clockwork. 7 p.m. sharp. The script never changed. "How's school? Making friends? Need anything?" I gave the expected answers while picturing her tumbling from her precious yacht. The other students dubbed me the ghost. I drifted through classes, ate silently, haunted the library, reading anything that might help: maritime law, inheritance statutes, criminal investigations. The librarian eyed me warily but stayed silent. Then the bullying started. Subtle at first. Gum mysteriously stuck in my hair during assembly. Homework vanishing. Escalating to whispered taunts in the halls, my belongings accidentally knocked over. I knew Brittany was behind it. Her initial excitement over my designer prison turned to resentment when she realized I didn't care about any of it. "What's wrong with you?" she snapped one night in our room. "Do you have any idea how lucky you are?" Lucky. The word was a physical blow. Lucky was dead. My parents were dead. Because of her. Because of my aunt. I was trapped. Anger, cold and sharp, replaced some of the numbness that I tried writing letters to old friends, pouring my heart out, begging for help. They always came back. Return to sender. Address unknown. Madison had severed all ties. Birthdays and holidays were exquisite torture. My 17th birthday, a coldly formal card from Madison and a pity cake from the dining hall staff. Thanksgiving, watching classmates disappear into waiting cars while I wandered the empty, echoing dorm. The silence was deafening. Russell stayed too. His family couldn't afford the trip home. We ate turkey sandwiches in the vast, deserted dining hall. "You ever think about running?" he asked, his voice bouncing off the empty walls. "Every single day," I admitted, the truth raw. "What stops you?" I thought of Madison's money, her connections, her ruthlessness. Nowhere to run to. Christmas break was the deepest circle of hell. Madison insisted I return to the mansion, a place that had never been home. She'd redecorated my room. Everything was now sterile white and cold gold. Even the air smelled different, cloying, expensive candles replacing any lingering memory of me. "I thought you'd appreciate something more sophisticated," she purred when she saw my dismay. She threw a massive Christmas party, parading me like a trophy. "My niece," she'd announce, thriving at Crestwood, top of her class. Lies. I was barely passing. Guests cooed over my luck, praising Madison's generosity. One woman, draped in diamonds and smelling strongly of wine, slurred, "It's so wonderful how Madison stepped in after that dreadful accident." Accident. The word was a knife. Later, after the guests left, Madison got drunk by the roaring fireplace, Coco shivering in her lap. Firelight cast demonic shadows on her face. "Your mother," she began, her voice thick with wine and venom, "never appreciated what I tried to do for her." I stayed silent, knowing she'd talk more if I didn't interrupt. I introduced her to Gregory Ashford. Owns half of Manhattan. Interested in her. Could have given her everything. But no. She spat the words. "She chose your father. A public school teacher." "They were happy," I whispered, the words scraping my throat. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Happy? Happy doesn't pay for private jets. Happy doesn't secure your future." I tried to make her see reason, but she was stubborn. "Just like you." My hands clenched into fists. "What do you mean?" Her eyes narrowed, cold and sharp despite the alcohol. "Oh, don't play naive. I see how you look at me. Like I'm the monster for giving you the life you deserve. You're just like her. Too proud to accept grace. Too blind to see the opportunity." The accusation hung heavy in the air. "Is that why you killed them?" The words tumbled out, raw and dangerous. The room went utterly still. The fire crackled, the only sound. Madison slowly set down her wine glass. "What did you say?" My heart pounded against my ribs. "I heard you. On the phone. You said you had to get rid of them." She stood, swaying slightly. Coco yelped as she dropped her. You must have misheard. Grief does strange things, darling. You weren't thinking clearly. I know what I heard. My voice shook, but I held her gaze, her expression hardened, the mask of concern slipping completely. You know what? I think you need to return to Crestwood early. This environment clearly isn't healthy for you. I was on a plane back to Connecticut the next morning. The second semester was worse. Madison had clearly called the school. Suddenly, I had a mentor. Mrs. Davidson. She smelled of mothballs and quiet disapproval. She shadowed me relentlessly, sat beside me in class, loomed at my table during meals, stood guard outside the bathroom stall. For your well-being, she'd simper, her smile never touching her cold eyes. Russell couldn't sit with me. Brittany formally requested a room change. Teachers eyed me with pity and suspicion. I was a marked girl, a problem that I started planning again, more desperately. I saved every stray coin, every dollar slipped from dining hall tips Russell sometimes left near my tray, hiding the pitiful stash in a tampon box under my bed. I memorized bus schedules. I researched homeless shelters in nearby cities. Hope felt like a dangerous, fragile thing. Then, spring break. Madison had a new surprise. We're going to Europe, she announced at pickup, Mrs. Davidson nodding approvingly beside her. Paris, Milan, Barcelona. A cultural immersion. Refusal wasn't an option. Mrs. Davidson's fake smile sealed it. The trip was a gilded nightmare. Endless museums where Madison criticized my posture. Restaurants where she mocked my attempts at French. More clothes, more jewelry, more suffocating experiences purchased to erase my grief and my identity. Standing atop the Eiffel Tower, she snatched my phone for a photo. Smile, she commanded. You'll want to remember this. All I could think about was the terrifying drop, the final escape. Returning to Crestwood, I discovered Russell was gone. Fired. No explanation. I saw him once, hurriedly clearing his locker in the staff area. Security hovered nearby. He pressed a crumpled piece of paper into my hand before they ushered him out. A phone number. Nothing else. I hid it deep in the lining of my shoe, clinging to this fragile lifeline that I waited, biding my time. The opportunity came 3 weeks later. Mrs. Davidson succumbed to food poisoning, likely from the questionable cafeteria sushi she loved. While she was violently ill in the nurse's office, I slipped out, heart pounding, and found a grimy payphone in town. The number belonged to Russell's sister, Maya, in Boston. He said you might call, she said, her voice warm with concern. Said you needed help. I can't talk long, I whispered, glancing around. But I need to get out. My aunt, she killed my parents. She has me trapped. A pause. Russell mentioned things. Look, I can't promise much. But if you can get to Boston, you've got a place to crash here. Figure things out. Hope, bright and terrifying, flared. But when I got back to campus, Madison was waiting in the headmaster's office. Skipping your mentor session, she'd sked, her voice deceptively smooth. That's unlike you, darling. I was confined to campus for the rest of the term. No town privileges. No calls except the Sunday check-ins. Mrs. Davidson was replaced by Mr. Garrett, an ex-Marine who took his watchdog duties very seriously. Summer came again. Another grim return to the mansion. More parties, more shopping, more pretending. But I was done pretending. I'd turned 18 in May. Legally, I was an adult. The only chains were fear and money. Then, I overheard another phone call. Her office door was slightly ajar, her voice echoing down the marble hall. The trust fund. Yes, accessible at 21. 3 more years. No, she remains unaware. Her parents never told her, and I certainly haven't. 10 million? Is that all? I expected more. Well, it will suffice. By then, she'll be properly appreciative of my guidance. $10 million. My parents had left me $10 million. And Madison was keeping it from me, waiting until she could mold me into a grateful heir. The revelation was staggering. That money wasn't just wealth, it was power. It was freedom. But I had to survive 3 more years under her thumb. Unless I didn't. That night at dinner, I began the performance of my life. I apologized for being difficult. I thanked her profusely for everything, even forcing myself to pet that vile poodle. I complimented her taste, her generosity. Her suspicion was palpable at first, but I persisted. Day after day, week after week. By summer's end, she actually seemed convinced I'd finally come around. I knew you'd see sense, she purred one evening, patting my hand with her cold, ringed fingers. Your mother was the same. Stubborn at first, but she always came around. The chilling implication hung in the air, but I swallowed my questions. The long game was all that mattered now. Senior year started with a slight reprieve. Convinced of my capitulation, Madison called off the watchdogs. I could breathe, use the bathroom in peace. I threw myself into college applications, my only path to freedom. Madison pushed for her alma mater, a stuffy private school in Vermont. I secretly applied everywhere else I could, using school computers when no one monitored. Thanksgiving break brought the next seismic shift. Back at the mansion for another of her dreadful dinner parties. The usual suspects. I wore another designer dress I hated, making hollow small talk. But Madison was different. Agitated. Constantly checking her phone, stepping out for hushed calls. Her lawyer, Gregory Ashford, the man she'd tried to set my mother up with, arrived midway through dinner, an unusual occurrence. After the guests left, she cornered me in the kitchen as I loaded the dishwasher. She was drunker than usual, words slightly slurred. Need you to sign some papers, she said, sliding a thick folder across the cold marble counter. Routine. Trust fund administration. My blood ran cold. Trust fund. She'd never mentioned it before. I pretended to read the dense legal jargon, my mind racing. From what I could decipher, it was designed to give her prolonged control over my inheritance, potentially even beyond my 21st birthday. What is this, exactly? I asked, keeping my voice level. Just formalities, she waved a dismissive hand. Ensuring everything's managed properly until you're mature enough. Her eyes were sharp, watching me. Sign here. I signed. What choice did I have? But as she turned to refill her wine glass, I quickly, desperately, snapped photos of every page with my phone. Back at Crestwood, I showed the photos to anyone who might understand. Most rich kids shrugged. But Julia, whose father was a high-powered lawyer, frowned at my screen during study hall. Whoa, she whispered. This is super sketchy. Like, really sketchy. She's trying to lock down your money, big time. Extend her control past your birthday. My heart sank. Of course she was. Christmas break was when the walls truly started closing in. Madison was paranoid. New security cameras sprouted everywhere. More staff appeared, their eyes constantly tracking me. Even Coco seemed like a furry spy, following me relentlessly. One sleepless night, I crept downstairs for water. Madison was in her office, door closed, but her voice carried clearly. The boat captain? Handled. Paid generously to disappear. The crew? Barely spoke English. Probably back in whatever hole they crawled from. The girl? Under control. Weak. Like her mother. Easily managed. Her voice was cold, detached. Then she said the words that froze my blood solid. If she becomes a liability, another boarding school tragedy can be arranged. Overdoses are tragically common among troubled teens. I ran back to my room and vomited into the designer wastebasket. She wasn't just planning to control me, she was planning to kill me if I resisted. The next morning, I plastered on a smile. Complimented her bracelet. But inside, terror warred with a fierce new determination. I needed evidence. Real evidence. Something undeniable that I remembered our old house. My parents' home. Madison had mentioned selling it eventually. Maybe it wasn't sold yet. Maybe something remained. I convinced her I needed closure, one last visit before college. Surprisingly, she agreed, likely smug about my recent obedience. The house looked heartbreakingly the same from the outside. The blue shutters Dad painted every summer. Mom's dormant tomato garden. Inside, furniture lay shrouded in ghostly white sheets. Madison waited in the car, giving me 20 minutes. Don't dawdle. I raced to Dad's study. Most was gone, but I knew his hiding spots. Behind a loose baseboard, I found it, an old flip phone, battery dead. I shoved it deep in my pocket. In my parents' bedroom, inside Mom's jewelry box, tucked beneath fake velvet, I found an envelope. Addressed to me. Dated a week before they died. Our dearest daughter, if you're reading this, something terrible has happened to us. The car horn blared outside. Time was up. I stuffed the unread letter into my bra and ran back at the mansion. Locked in the bathroom, I read it with trembling hands. My parents knew. They knew Madison was dangerous, unhinged by greed and resentment. They documented her threats, her attempts to control them. They'd hidden evidence, photos, weather reports, recordings, in a safety deposit box. They gave me the bank name, box number, and mentioned a key. Where was the key? I spent 3 frantic days, packing, tearing through everything. Finally, in the lining of my old, discarded wallet, the one Madison tried to throw away, I felt it. A small, hard lump. Mom must have sewn it in. The key, but how to get to the bank? Providence arrived in the form of Coco. The wretched poodle got violently ill. Madison panicked, rushing her to the emergency vet. The moment her car disappeared, I grabbed the hidden cash from my tampon box and called an Uber. The driver, Betty, was an older woman with kind eyes. She didn't ask why I looked so terrified. The bank was 20 minutes away. I had maybe an hour. The safety deposit box was small, but its contents were earth-shattering. Photos of Serenity docked under clear blue skies. Printed weather reports confirming calm seas. A small digital recorder. And a will, notarized, witnessed, explicitly stating that in the event of their deaths, I was to go to my godparents, Frank and Catherine in Oregon, not Madison. Hands shaking violently, I took photos with my phone. Then I grabbed the physical evidence, the photos, the recorder, the will. On my way out, I begged the bank manager to make certified copies and seal them in a new box only I could access. Betty was waiting. "You okay, honey?" she asked, seeing my pale face. "I need to go to the police station," I gasped, but as we pulled up, I saw it, Madison's pink Tesla parked right outside. She'd figured it out. "Drive." I choked out. "Please, just drive." We ended up at a McDonald's 3 towns over. I was sobbing, shaking uncontrollably. Betty bought me coffee and sat with me. "Want to talk about it?" she asked gently. And I did. I told her everything. The boat, the murder, the cover-up, the boarding school, the threats. She listened, her face growing graver with each word. "My son," she said finally, her voice firm, "he's a detective. In Boston. Different state. Your aunt won't have her claws in that department." She called him right there. Within an hour, I was sitting in a Boston precinct, telling my story to detectives who actually listened. The investigation moved with stunning speed. The evidence was damning. The weather reports alone destroyed Madison's storm story. The recordings on the device were my parents' voices, filled with fear, discussing her threats just days before they died. The will proved her guardianship was fraudulent. They arrested her at the mansion. I heard she blamed everyone, the captain, the crew, even claimed my parents were suicidal. Each lie only buried her deeper. Her expensive lawyer fought hard. He got her bail. The trial loomed, a terrifying prospect of months or years. I couldn't go back. But my godparents, Frank and Catherine in Oregon, welcomed me with open arms and tearful hugs. We never believed her, Catherine sobbed, holding me tight. We tried to find you, but she blocked us at every turn. Your mother would never have wanted you with Madison. Their home was a bomb, smelling of coffee, old books, and chaos. They had 3 boisterous kids who instantly claimed me as their big sister. And then, the miracle. Frank led me to the backyard. We have someone who missed you, he said softly. Lucky bounded around the corner, older, a little grayer, but his eyes lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. He nearly knocked me over, whining, licking my face, his tail a frantic blur. I buried my face in his fur and wept. He turned up at a pet store, Frank explained, his own eyes wet. We saw him, recognized the address on his chip. We tried so hard to reach you, but Madison, the trial was a media circus. Madison played the grieving, misunderstood sister in her designer suits. But the evidence was overwhelming. The boat captain, facing his own charges, testified against her for a reduced sentence. He admitted she paid him to take them to a dangerous current area, to disable the emergency equipment, to lie. She wasn't convicted of murder. Her slick lawyer bargained it down to manslaughter and fraud. She only meant to scare them, he argued. She got 15 years. Enough that I learned my parents were smarter than anyone knew. Their trust was ironclad. If they died before I turned 21 while Madison was guardian, she only got a small monthly stipend for my care. The bulk was untouchable until my birthday. That's why she needed those signed papers, to break the trust that I started college in Oregon, near Frank and Catherine. A state school. I study education, like Mom. I wear jeans from Target. I eat cafeteria food. It feels like freedom. Like coming home. Russell found me online after the news broke. He'd been fired for asking too many questions about my well-being. He's okay now, working in a Boston restaurant, saving for culinary school. Julia from Crestwood messaged too. Her lawyer dad offered help if needed. Not everyone there was lost. The nightmares still come. The scent of Chanel No. 5 still makes me flinch. But Lucky sleeps on my bed every night, his soft snores a lullaby. Frank and Catherine never complain about his fur. The $10 million waits. I think about scholarships for kids escaping abuse. Maybe donating it all. I haven't decided that why parents were right. Money doesn't make you happy. Family does. Real family. The kind that doesn't try to kill you for your inheritance. The letters from prison still arrive. Thick, expensive paper. Madison Hawthorne. I don't read them. Frank burns them in the fireplace while Catherine makes hot chocolate. The kids argue over movies. It's loud, messy, and perfect. It's not the life my parents planned, but I think they'd be proud that I'm in college. I have people who love me. Lucky still gets generic kibble because, honestly, he doesn't know the difference. He's just happy. Some nights, I look at the small, creased photo I hid in my bra that awful day, Mom and Dad smiling, arms around each other. I tell them about my classes, my friends, the boy in statistics who tells terrible math jokes. Normal stuff. Dinner table stuff. I know they can't hear me, but it helps them why Aunt is in prison. I'm safe. And Lucky is currently snoring on my lap, a warm, comforting weight. Life is incredibly, painfully weird sometimes. But I'm here. I survived. And it does get better. Slowly. One breath, one step, one wag of a loyal tail at a time. Oh, and Coco? The poodle survived. She lives with one of Madison's rich friends now. I hope she chews all their designer shoes. Maybe that's petty. But after everything, I think I've earned a little pettiness.